Okay, so we construct a graph of y equals 2 to the x that looks like this, right? Now, for what I want to do, I actually want a graph that is a little more spread out. So I'm going to put 2 here, I'm going to put 1 here, I'll put 4 here, 2 here, 1 here, and 3 here. This graph would work, but this one's going to work a little better to tell us how rich we're going to be in 40 years. Okay? So we have this point, and this point, and this point. Then, of course, we go over here 1 unit, and we have got a point down here, and over here we got a lower point. So we can kind of see how this curve goes. Make sense? Okay? So this curve and this curve have the shape of a y equals 2 to the x graph. Now all we want right now is the shape. So we're going to, I'm going to go ahead and erase the labeling. I'm going to erase the labeling of the axes. I'm going to use a different labeling. Okay. First thing I'm going to say is and I'm going to call this a t-axis instead of an x-axis. I'll still call this one y for now. Okay? Since I've erased my labeling, it doesn't matter whether I used x or t, I would have gotten the same numbers, right? So it wouldn't have made any difference. When t equals 0, I'm going to say y equals, oh, I don't know, how much money you want to start out with?
$500.
Huh?
500.
Okay, I'm going to give you a promote. We're going to say $5,000. Okay? Let's just say you got $5,000, which you might not, but hopefully soon. Okay? You got $5,000, right? You're going to invest that, and you're going to invest this in faith that it's going to grow exponentially, which is what it will do if the interest rate doesn't change. So if you invest it at fixed interest, that's what's going to happen, as long as you invest it in a safe source. Okay? And there's no such thing as a totally safe source, but some are safer than others. And the safest ones, of course, give you the lowest interest rate. Okay? You go for a high interest rate, you're taking more risk usually. Okay? And you might not even want to invest it that way. You know, you figure out how to invest your money. But if you invested it this way, assuming you got money to invest, which not everybody your age does, okay? But you do want to start that as soon as you can. And listen to financial planners, not me. Okay, so when t equals 0, y equals $5,000. Okay, what does that tell you? There's a point on the graph that would correspond to that. What point is it?
0 and 5,000.
Huh?
0 and 5,000.
And that point would be where? You tell me where to stop on the curve. My arm's going to come, it's going to get really painful. Y'all are trying to hurt me. But I'm too smart. I stopped before my shoulders separated. Now next time I might not, so please be kind and tell me where to stop here so I hit that point, okay?
On the y-axis. Yeah.
Huh?
On the y-axis. Right
Yeah, there. Because that's where t equals 0, right? It's the only place where t equals 0. It's the only place on this curve where t equals 0. Okay? So that has to be it. Which means that this has to be $5,000. Okay, so that tells me how the t-axis has to be labeled, right? Now, when we originally did it, these things had equal intervals. That was 1, that was 1, that was 1, that was 1, right? Well, now if So this has to be the same as this, has to be the same as this, has to be the same as this. Didn't exactly draw it that way, but if you draw it carefully, that's the way it'll be, right? So what will this be?
10,000.
And I know what you're going to tell me this is, and I know what you're going to tell me this is. Now again, I haven't drawn this graph real neatly. That seems a little smaller than that interval, but you want to subdivide more carefully than I did, okay? And you'll get a better shape on the graph. I didn't want to make it too good. You know, that one's pretty good. This one kind of slopped it down because that's the way most of the homework looks. And it's good enough to understand what's going on. I don't think you want to base your life financial plan on a graph like this, okay? It's a little rough, okay? This interval looks a little shorter than this. Actually, though, when I space it out, it looks shorter, but it's about the same. But yeah, that and I don't know, maybe kind of okay, right? Okay, whether they're good or not, this is how you use the graph. And the better your graph, the better your estimates are going to be. Okay, so when t equals 0, y equals $5,000. Okay? You still don't know how to draw the t-axis because all you got is 0 there, right? I haven't given you anything that allows you to see where the t-axis is, right? Okay? So I want to now say this. It turns out that's a pretty good interest rate. Okay? So how am I going to locate that point?
You go to 8,000 on the.
Yeah, look at where 8,000 is. Very good. So we look at where 8,000 is. And we come over to the graph and we come down here. And that has to be what?
10.
That's 10. Okay? Make sense? Okay, so now I can ask the question. Okay, so now I've relabeled my graph. You know, I had 1 and 2 here, and I had 1, 2, 3, 4 here. But the model I want to use this graph for is the growth of an investment at a constant interest rate. Okay? So now, if that's 10, well, that means, what do you think this is?
20.
If this is 10, what's that?
Like 11 or 12.
Yeah, I'd go with 12. So let's say 12 is here, so 24 is here. And 20 be about here, right? Now we can, label all the points we want to, okay? But my question is now, so what's the value let's say t equals 20.
15,000.
15,000? It's not a bad estimate.
Roughly.
Okay, now let's just see what happens if I draw the projection lines. It's going to be really unreliable, but I'm going to do it anyway. Okay, so here's 20. This graph is a little crooked because of the perspective I had when I drew it. And I bring this one straight over. Okay. Well, actually, I'm getting something that may be closer to 16 or 17,000. So we'll just say and I think I said it was 16,000. I think it was. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay? That's not a very good estimate of what really happens, Because what happens here is this grew by $3,000 starting at $5,000. Okay, that's about a 60% increase. Now, if I have a 60% increase on this, it comes out closer to 15,000, so you had a better eye than my drawing. Okay? Either that or you were lucky, and I was unlucky. I don't know. I'm going to give you credit, though. Okay? So, yeah, my estimate was 16,000 based on my graph. Your eye told you 15. And actually, it would grow in another 10 years. If it grows 60% here, 60% of 8,000, actually, that 15,000 was wrong. It grows by 4,800. 60% of 8,000 is 4,800. That's only 13,800. That's more like 14,000, so we were both a little high. I'll still pretend you were a lot closer than I was, because you were. Okay, fair enough? Okay, well, the graph isn't great. It gets a little rough out here, okay? Like I say. But we draw those lessons, okay? And if I had a really well-drawn graph with really precise scales and measured it out and everything, it wouldn't be close enough to go to the bank and say, hey, this is what I should have. The bank can do the calculation, and by the end of the course, or by the middle of the course, or actually pretty soon, you'll know how to do that calculation. Okay? Fairly simple calculation, but you know, we've got some stuff to get through before we get to that. Okay? So you won't have to rely on the bank. You'll be able to check them. But one way or another, you still have a picture on this graph of about where you should be. So if your graph tells you should be at 16,000, the bank says you're at 14,000, you say, they're probably right. Then you take out your calculator and figure it out. Okay? Just to be sure. And for planning, you never know what the interest rates are really going to do anyway. You never know if the institution you invested this in is even going to exist in 20 years. Although, you know, have pretty good history being stable. Make sense? Okay. Yes, that's what I mean by relabeling a graph. Now, if you have the graph and it has the right shape, you can relabel it according to whatever information you have. Okay? Now, you don't know yet why the shape of the 2 to the t graph ought to give you the shape of an interest curve, but it does. Because it's just a basic exponential function. That's how interest works. And again, that's not real hard to understand. You got to understand compound interest a little bit first. We'll be talking about that in class, because people really don't understand it very well. Okay? Just another quick comment. I went through and scored all the assessment tests. What you got is you got low scores, and you got a couple of really high scores. Okay? But it's like you got 4 groups. You got a group here, a group here, a group here, and a group here. This group is really small. This group is small. This group is really big. And this group is kind of small. Not as small as these, but kind of small. You guys are both right in this group, the big group. So, you know, pretty much your assessment tests looked about like most everybody else's, except a few outliers. Okay? And they weren't down here. So you guys are, as far as I can tell, as well prepared as most of the class. Except there's some algebra you got to work through and a few things that you haven't yet had. So that's what you're doing here. But also, you know, if you're having problems with something, especially if you're both having problems with the same thing, but even just one of you, we can address it in here. Okay? And that's the purpose of this class. And I wanted to clarify that. Also wanted to see how you're doing with graphing these. Make sure you can graph all of these functions. Make sure you can make those tables and graph them and know the rules you're following. Okay? Okay, let me cut this off for a minute.